What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Nick, and I hope you guys are doing well whenever you are checking out the latest video here on the YouTube page. Today, my friends, we are going to do another terrific TV themed video for you guys, and it's in a style that we haven't done in quite some time here. We're going to be reacting to a brand new TV list that just dropped a few days ago from Rolling Stone. This is their list of the top 100 greatest TV episodes of all time, and we're going to go through and react and see how well they did at picking out the best episodes here. The last time we did this, we took a look at Variety's list of the top 100 best shows of all time, which is a more common topic to see with these types of lists. You don't normally see episodes, and I have a feeling that's going to be reflected in the quality of this list. I don't honestly have high hopes for this one, not necessarily because Rolling Stone is the absolute worst publication when it comes to these things, although depending on who you ask, there are definitely people out there who think that. I think they're a little bit more hit or miss, and honestly, I would give them some more credit than other people who just think they absolutely just, whiff every single time. But for the most part, I think episodes are really difficult to nail down just because there's so many more options to pick from. Obviously, if a show has, just 100 episodes right there, you could hypothetically constitute an entire list of just one show. So, multiply that by the numerous amount of shows out there, and it gets a little tricky. That being said, though, I am very curious to see what they have. I'm very curious to see what shows are represented the most here, because I'm going to go out on a limb and just assume that they have multiple episodes per show on here. It just seems highly unlikely and honestly quite impossible to make a list like this without picking more than one episode for certain shows. So my predictions as far as what shows are going to have the most representation here are Seinfeld, Breaking Bad, and The Twilight Zone. I've thought about this a lot. I think those three are the most likely because Seinfeld and Breaking Bad are typically the biggest two within their respective categories, comedy and drama. And then with The Twilight Zone, I just feel like the episodic nature of that is going to lend itself better to this list than a series that is more narrative, serialized with arcs there. I think the distinctive episodes of The Twilight Zone are going to be easier to pick out when you're looking back in retrospect, and it'll be a little bit easier to pinpoint certain moments or certain characters, things like that. And obviously, it's a very well-established show. It's, been on these lists forever. So I think that'll also have an advantage there. A couple dark horses that I have as well as far as some more recent shows that I would love to see because they're some of my personal favorites. The Last of Us, Abbott Elementary, and The Bear. I think those three all have a shot here. I don't know how, super likely it is, but it would be very cool to see any of those get on here. And then, of course, any of the shows you see behind me are also some of my personal favorites. I don't know if a lot of these are going to be on here, with one exception, which is How I Met Your Mother, which, if you don't already know, is my favorite show of all time. This is actually how I came across the list. It was in the Himium subreddit when I saw there was an entry on here. So we'll talk about that a little bit more when we get into it. But as for now, let's take a look at the list here. We see the top 100 best TV episodes. This just came out September 2nd here, so it's very recent, within the week here. And you can already see this little collage. They have some familiar faces, nothing too out of the ordinary here. Of course, Walter White, Homer Simpson, Don Draper, all the usual suspects here that you would find for these lists. I did take a look at this little blurb they have here just ahead of time, just to see their criteria and such. Essentially, the main points that I want to share with you guys are, they say, no reality TV, no news, no sketch comedy, nothing like that, which makes sense. I didn't think that they were going to have, any shows in those styles anyway. It's kind of weird to put like an SNL or, like 60 Minutes or something. That just seemed a little out of place. So nothing like that. And they also emphasize they're going to focus more on American TV rather than international stuff, which makes sense because Rolling Stone is an American company. But with that said, I think it's time that we get into this. Of course, let me know in the comments what you thought about the list. What are some of your favorite TV episodes? I'm very curious to find out what they've decided to include here. So with that said, let's get it started here. Number 100, we have Fargo here, Bisquick. from season 5. So I think this is very, very recent. It says it's from this year, January 2024. So that's a very good sign that we do have some open doors here for, like I said, shows like The Bear or Abbott or something like that. Fargo's awesome. I haven't seen season 5 myself, so I can't comment on this particular episode, but Fargo as a whole is a very, very good show, so that's no surprise there. Again, it's very low though, so there might only be a few shows from, this decade that just barely squeak on there, but that's really cool to see. Number 99, oh, we do have The Cosby Show. Right off the bat, we're getting hot, we're getting controversial here. The fact that they've even included a Cosby Show episode at all, that's saying something. Very interesting move by Rolling Stone. Again, Rolling Stone gonna Rolling Stone sometimes, and obviously The Cosby Show has its place in history, whether you want to, give it its credit or not, give it its flowers or not. But it is a very important show for TV, of course, for the sitcom world. It was very groundbreaking in a lot of ways and helped establish a familiar sort of tone and theme to itself. So I can see why it's on here. I don't know if I would personally put it on here, but again, it's low. So you can kind of give them a little bit of a pass there. It's only 99, so it's not like they put this, at number 1 or anything. All right, let's keep moving on. Here we have South Park here, Scott Tenorman Must Die. This is an all-time classic here from season 5. Definitely one of the more famous South Park episodes. Of course, you see that infamous scene here with the chili. If you know, you know. That's pretty much all that needs to be said there. That's a really solid pick, in my opinion. Moving on from that, looks like we have You're the Worst here. You're the Worst is another very underrated sitcom here. It's a really, really funny show. I haven't seen as much of it as I wish. This is definitely a show that I need to come back to at some point. So that's a really solid pick as well. Number 96 here, we have In Treatment, Alex Week 8. So In Treatment, I've heard of this show. It's an old HBO drama from, I think, the late 2000s, early 2010s. And it's about therapy here. So you see we're in a therapist office here. Alex Week 8 kind of follows these patients as they go throughout their journey to rehabilitate themselves. Again, I don't know too much about the show, like the details of it. I just kind of know the basic outline like that. But I know it is very popular. I think it did win, or at least was nominated for some Emmys here. So it's not one that you see very often, but again, it makes sense here. They did say in that little intro as well that they could pick shows that, have a really great moment to them. A few episodes that really stood out amongst a show that was kind of more just average or, just kind of there compared to the higher, more established shows in a lot of ways. So I think this is an example of that. It's not really one that you see on the overall best lists, but for individual moments, it certainly has a lot of those that are worth seeking out. Number 95 here, we have Bob's Burgers. This one is really great here. This is another classic episode in the cartoon world. I'm surprised we're already seeing a bit of cartoons here. This is an all-time classic here. If you've never seen the scene where they actually do show her driving in the parking lot, definitely check that out at least. That is a absolutely hilarious moment here. And Bob's Burgers, I mean, it's just such a consistent show. You could honestly pick from a ton of episodes there to put on here. So another solid pick in my eyes. Number 94, we have Enlightened here. Consider Helen from season 1. Enlightened is another show that I think on the previous list I mentioned was one that I never really heard of. So now I'm seeing it a couple times here. Could be a case where it's just one of those older shows that's kind of getting a reassessment of sorts. But yeah, that's cool. Enlightened, again, don't know too much about this one, but solid pick overall. All right, what do we have next here? Maud's Dilemma here, 93. This, I'm honestly surprised, is not higher. This is one of those episodes that, when I was kind of thinking about this list and thinking, what potentially could be on here, these older episodes of sitcoms from like the 70s and 80s, like this one, for example, that are more politically charged, that are more, risque, maybe pushing the envelope a little bit. This one in particular about abortion, which of course is a very, very controversial topic, even all these years later. If you know anything about what's going on in this year in the US, this election, It's a very big talking point. So I'm honestly surprised it's not higher, because this was one of those episodes that put abortion and these sorts of topics into the spotlight, and it remains a fan favorite to this day. So only 93. I think they kind of lowballed this a little bit, but we'll have to see what else is on here. And of course, for just these types of shows as well, I think All in the Family has a good chance of also being quite high on this list with those types of episodes too, that are kind of pushing the envelope a little bit. So, but at the very least, of course, I'm glad it made the cut here, because this is a very important episode to TV. Moving on here to number 92, we have Scrubs here, my screw up. Scrubs, you know, one of those shows that personally I'm not the biggest fan of. I do think it's a little overhyped, but I know this one is a fan favorite. Of course, Brendan Fraser here with his classic, you know, guest starring appearance here. I don't know if he was nominated for any awards or anything, but I know within the fandom, within the, you know, sitcom landscape, this is considered one of the best guest appearances out there. So again, it makes sense here, even though it might not be my cup of tea. Moving on here to 91, we have Watchmen here, another classic HBO series. This one a mini series. I've never watched it myself, pardon the pun, but again, it makes sense. This is another show that you see pop up from time to time. Number 90, we have The Golden Girls. Again, these classic, you know, older sitcoms here. This one from season 6, it appears. Golden Girls doesn't really need much to be said here. I mean, it's a iconic sitcom for a reason, and of course, R.I.P. Betty White. It appears that we have another cartoon on our hands here with SpongeBob with Pizza Delivery. That is a really good pick. This is a classic one. So many quotes, of course. You can say that about tons of SpongeBob episodes. If I had to predict here, I would have probably put my money on Band Geeks personally, and honestly, Band Geeks, it's a chance that we could still see it on here. We haven't seen any duplicates yet, but we're only 10 episodes in, so very well could be some more down the road. But yeah, Pizza Delivery, I mean, even if you're not a fan of SpongeBob or you haven't seen that much of the show, chances are you've definitely seen or heard a little bit about this one. It's that classic, you know, buddy tale between SpongeBob and Squidward, and like I said, just has so many great quotables there. Towards the end of the episode, of course, when they're dealing with that Karen of a customer, or Jeff of a customer. Fuck that guy, man. Such a dick. But yeah, an absolute classic in my opinion. All right, number 88 here, we have Roseanne here. Roseanne, another show that, similar to The Cosby Show, has sort of been reevaluated, reassessed of sorts, as not being maybe as profound as it once was because of its lead star there. But honestly, this is another one that I think holds up to a pretty strong degree now. I think it has a lot of very important talking points. It's got a lot of poignant messaging here, so can't necessarily knock this one. Number 87 here, we have The Dick Van Dyke Show, Never Bathe on Saturday. What a title there. Yeah, this one, they do the classic bit where she gets stuck in the drain there. They've done that a few times, parodied a few times here. Dick Van Dyke is another one of those classic black and white old school sitcoms that honestly, in my opinion, still holds up. Some people, you know, I've heard argue that there's better shows, of course, in that subcategory, I Love Lucy being one of them, and I'm sure we'll see some I Love Lucy here. But Dick Van Dyke, again, I can't knock this one. This is a really classic one. It has, of course, all those classic gags that have been parodied and, you know, spoofed over the years, so very essential watching, in my opinion. All right, here we have, it looks like Black Mirror here. San Junipero. I honestly, this is going to sound controversial, I know. Me being the contrarian, I think this episode is overhyped. I do love Black Mirror. I'm hoping we see more Black Mirror, White Christmas in particular. White Christmas is fucking incredible. But this one, I don't know. I'm not convinced this is the best Black Mirror episode like so many people say. I think the twist in this one is a little weak, honestly. I don't think it hits quite as hard. The lead characters are not as interesting to follow. They're not as charismatic as some of the other characters that they would show in the series at points. I get the, like, you know, emphasis on technology, of course, and this particular episode has a lot of stuff with, like, AI and stuff like that. So I get the idea that it's important and that it's poignant, but I just don't think it's executed as well. And I'm trying to talk around it so I don't give it away, because I think it is worth checking out. If you've never seen Black Mirror, I mean, all the episodes are worth checking out to some extent, right? They all have a very similar kind of look and feel, but they're executed, and they all have different characters. They all have different storylines. It's an anthology. So I don't want to give too much away in case you do want to see it for yourself, but to me at least, I think it is a little overhyped. I probably wouldn't have it on my list. I do just hope that they have something above it to kind of make up for it. All right, next up here, Sex and the City here. Again, Sex and the City. I talked about this last time, but Sex and the City is a really, really good show. And I think it's getting its reappraisal here, especially in the light of like more inclusivity and, more kind of putting women forward and stuff. It was a pretty groundbreaking show back when it aired in the 90s, and has only gotten stronger with time, gotten a better reappraisal with time. So again, I can't knock this one. I've seen bits and pieces of Sex and the City. I don't know if I've seen this particular episode, but honestly, pretty consistent throughout. I haven't seen any duds myself. Number 84, we have Broad City here. This is another one that sort of has a very similar tone to Sex and the City as far as it being like female-centric and, of course, a comedy set in New York. It's got a lot of similarities there, but I have not watched it myself. I'm not too familiar with the storyline. I don't know too much about the show, in detail here, so I think we're just gonna move on to the next one here. Although Broad City, I'm sure it's a respectable pick. Here we go, The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Papa's got a brand new excuse. Again, another one that I'm honestly surprised is this low, if only for the fact that maybe because Will Smith, again, has sort of been, a little more controversial in the last few years. And this show, it's reflected how people talk about The Fresh Prince since then. But, I mean, such a just powerful, emotive scene, Hard to overstate for sure how just powerful and intensely emotive this one is, and I think how it really resonated with a lot of people who maybe saw that in their own lives or have experiences with their own fathers or parents in that same sort of way, and just such a important stepping stone for especially comedy to be extremely realistic and frank with that sort of stuff, and not shy to hold back on these more just maybe risque topics of sorts. All right, coming in next at 82, we have Doctor Who here. This is a very interesting pick. Doctor Who is another one with just a bajillion episodes, so how you narrow it down is beyond me. But this is another show that honestly, for as much as it's talked about, I've just never watched. I had not really had that much interest in watching Doctor Who, partially because it is so widespread and there's so much material for it, but also just because sci-fi is just not really my cup of tea personally, so it doesn't do much for me. But again, it makes sense to include at least one Doctor Who episode because it is such an established franchise in TV. Next up here, Alias, Truth Be Told. This is actually the pilot episode of Alias, you can see there, from season 1. I have seen this one. Alias is a really underrated drama from the 2000s here. Of course, Jennifer Garner, shout out to her, a really, really good actress here. I like this episode quite a bit. It's actually one of the things that I think Alias does really well, which is just the element of surprise. You don't really know what's supposed to come next. You're kind of led in one direction, and it kind of throws you a couple curveballs here. There's a lot of really good episodes here in the series, and I think this is one of those that establishes it very well as a pilot here. It kind of puts you right in the center of the action and gives you a good sense of what this show is going to be, the characters, everything about the tone. This is one of the better pilots that for sure I've watched, and I've seen quite a bit of pilots in my day, as you know, so definitely a solid pick here. I'm surprised that there's honestly not any more pilots so far that we haven't seen, so we'll see how that pans out for the rest of the list here. Number 80 here, It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, of course. This is just a show that, again, this is going to be a hot take. It just doesn't do much for me, and I expected to see It's Always Sunny, but again, it gun to my head, I couldn't tell you what episode because I'm just not too familiar with the show. Mac bangs Dennis's mom. That is one hell of a title. So just on the brink of that, I mean, you got to expect some insanity there. But for me, It's Always Sunny is just not really my style here. So again, not going to spend too much time on this one. Next up here, 79 Grey's Anatomy. It's the end of the world as we know it here. This looks like it's another two-parter here from season 2. Grey's Anatomy, I'm honestly surprised again. This is another show that has gotten a bit of a resurgence in popularity. I mean, it's always been popular, of course, but especially from a critical side of things, seeing it on these best of lists here in the last few years, it's definitely been popping up more often than not, and it wasn't really like that back in the day. This was always seen as more just like, typical network, medical drama. It was kind of written off as that. And now people are kind of coming back to it and thinking, this actually has a little bit more substance to it here. Grey's Anatomy, and it's not the best medical drama out there. There's definitely some that are superior that I think just do this format better, just, as it exists in TV. But honestly, I give it props. I mean, Grey's Anatomy, it's hard to talk about TV without bringing it up because it's been on for a million years at least, so there's definitely that. But someone that's maybe a little more familiar can explain this one in the comments there. Looking at number 78, we have Girls Here, American Bitch, another insane title there. Girls is interesting because this was one of those shows that I think when it first aired, it got a ton of press, man. It was just everywhere. This was just one of those shows that you just could not escape, right? Leah Dunham was on every magazine and the show was being marketed everywhere. And then somewhere down the line, it just stopped. They just put, a cap on that. There was just not a lot of press for the later seasons of this show. So to see a season 6 episode represented, kind of surprising, honestly. All right. Oh no, is this Everybody Loves Raymond? It sure is. Everybody Loves Raymond baggage here. Oh man, I hate to keep doing this because the shows that they're picking, I mean, again, I understand why they're on here. Again, these shows are no strangers to these types of lists, but this is another show that it doesn't do much for me. I'm sorry, I just don't really like Ray Romano. I think he's kind of annoying. I don't really like Patricia Heaton. I think she's kind of annoying. There just isn't a lot here to pull me in. So again, I'm not going to spend too much time here. All right, King of the Hill, Bobby Goes Nuts from season 6. King of the Hill is classic, man. Another cartoon that has a lot of quotables and is extremely just endearing to its millions and millions of fans here. And of course, Bobby is one of the best characters on the show, so picking an episode that's centered around him makes a lot of sense here. I'm honestly surprised. So we're about a quarter of the way through. We have not seen any duplicates yet. So maybe I was wrong. Maybe they are limiting it to 1 per episode. They didn't say explicitly that they were going to do that. I just assumed they wouldn't, but so far we haven't seen any yet. And as far as the variety goes, I think it's pretty solid. We've seen a good mix of drama and comedy and cartoons and everything in between. As far as the quality of the list itself, it's been a little rocky, more so just because a lot of these shows I just don't gel with. But overall, for Rolling Stone at the very least, I would say it's probably within average of what I would expect from them, for better or worse. So let's keep on moving on here. 75, we have Insecure from season 3. So this one is another show that's kind of in the same vein as Girls, I feel like, where it got a lot of hype really early on and then it kind of just died down a little bit. So again, this is a bit of a later episode. I think it was only on for 4 seasons. So this is kind of towards the back end of the show. But Insecure, as far as just if I were to prefer to watch it over Girls, I would definitely think Insecure is better just from the little bits that I've seen and just what I've heard of it. Moving on, we have Game of Thrones here, A Night of the Seven Kingdoms from season 8 here. This is fascinating. So someone is going to have to explain this one because I see season 8 there and I'm just perplexed a little bit coming from the outside in, not knowing too much about Game of Thrones. I just don't know how that's going to go over well with the fandom because I know season 8 is very infamous here. Maybe because it's so early on in the season, maybe they were setting things up and maybe they just dropped the ball at the very end, or if the entire season was just not it, So someone's definitely going to have to, explain what they were thinking here with this one, if this is a valid choice or not. I would be genuinely shocked if this was the only episode and it was from season 8. That would just be crazy. So we'll just have to see it, I guess. All right, 73. We do have The Good Place here, Michael's Gambit from season 1. This is such a good one, man. The Good Place is just such a consistent show. So this is another one. I mean, you can honestly pick any of the episodes here and it'd probably be a pretty valid choice here. But season 1 in particular is very memorable to me. I kind of weirdly have nostalgia for season 1 because it was one of the last shows that I actually watched pretty religiously when it was airing on regular TV, just before like streaming kind of took over and everyone switched to a binging format and stuff and just didn't really watch just regular broadcast anymore. So this was one of the last shows that I really remember just, you know, like just being addicted to, just being hooked on it and having to watch it every single week. And of course, this being the season 1 finale, you have that insane cliffhanger and no one's going to snark at that, right? That is one of the best twists, one of the best moments in the show that just keeps you wanting to watch more, keeps you coming back for more. I think this is a very, very good choice. I honestly, now that I'm thinking about it, I would honestly put this a little bit higher here. I mean, again, The Good Place so consistent, so you could have something else above this, but this is a pretty damn good choice. But only 73? We're going to see what else is on here. 72, Star Trek. Okay, City on the Edge of Forever. So this is an early Star Trek episode. I will say I am one of those people that does prefer the original Star Trek over Next Generation. Not by much. I do like both. My dad is a huge Star Trek fan, so we watch it with him a lot. But I do like the original Star Trek quite a bit. So I'm glad to see it represented here. Again, it's a pretty consistent show. It has, you know, some more experimental episodes here and there that are a little less than, you know, I would say below average in that case. But this is a pretty solid one, City on the Edge of Forever. So I like that pick there. 71 here, My So-Called Life, another pilot episode. This is actually one of the few shows that I've just never watched. So me and the master of TV pilots, I'm going to have to catch up and check out this show because this is another one I've seen pop up on quite a few of these lists. But My So-Called Life, one of those one-season wonders, you know, canceled too soon, whatever you want to apply to it there. A show that was, I would say, a bit ahead of its time here, kind of a coming-of-age series. So something I think I would enjoy. So I'm going to have to check that out at some point now that I know it's on this list. All right, number 70, Master of None, Thanksgiving. This is Aziz Ansari, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, Aziz Ansari there. Another show that I've heard of, but I've never actually watched myself. All right, the infamous number 69 here, For All Mankind, The Grey. This is a very recent show as well. This is another show that's from the 2020s here. I believe it's on Apple TV, if I'm not mistaken. But it's like a sci-fi drama. It's about astronauts or space or something along those lines. Again, you can kind of tell it's one that I've heard of and I know pieces about, but I've never watched myself. It probably is some sort of finale, I'm guessing, based on the episode count there. So pretty interesting to see. Again, we've seen a few of these now, shows that are very recent from the 2020s. So it's not like they are shy about including, you know, more recent stuff and, you know, taking into consideration both quality but as well as legacy here. We've seen some very old stuff, some very new stuff. So I like the variety here that they have so far. All right, number 68 here, we have St. Elsewhere, Time Heals. Shout out St. Elsewhere, of course, one of the goated medical dramas, and shout out Tommy Westfall. If you know, you know here. Really good pick there. All right, it looks like we have some Larry Sanders here. We have Flip from season 6. Larry Sanders, man, it's one of those shows that, again, like you see pop up on these types of lists all the time for a very good reason. I think it's a pretty underrated show for as much press as it gets and for as much sort of coverage as it gets on these lists. It's one of those shows that was very inventive, very unique for its time. If someone now did a kind of satire or spoof type of show about TV, right, that would kind of just be par for the course because there's so many of them now. Back in the 90s, especially on HBO, you didn't see that too often. So pretty ahead of its time there, and this is a classic one in my opinion. Moving on next, Orange is the New Black here. Toast Can Never Be Bread Again. I just love the episode names, man. So inventive. But yeah, I really like Orange is the New Black as well. It's another show that I want to see more of. I've never seen this far into the series here, season 4, but I know my parents absolutely love it, so they probably really love this pick here. They say it has a ton of really solid episodes there. Number 65 here, The Andy Griffith Show, OP the Birdman. Man, as far as like Andy Griffith goes, and again, I know this is going to sound controversial, say it with me now, this show is just not my cup of tea, man. I know everyone loves the Andy Griffith Show. It's just a little too maybe old school, too old fashioned for my taste. As far as its comedy goes, it's a little bit more centralized to a different time period, I guess is the best way to say it. It's just some of that stuff that's a little bit more like universal with I Love Lucy or Dick Van Dyke. It's a little more broad. It's a little more, it has a bit more free range to it. This feels a little bit more of its time, in my opinion. So it just doesn't really gel as much for me. But again, it's hard to make a list like this and not put it on there because I think it was like number 1 for X amount of seasons. It was a very, very popular show in its time, so it makes sense, but it's just not really my cup of tea. All right, here we go. Good Times here, another iconic one from the 70s. I believe this is another one that has sort of a political bent to it, or it tackled sort of a bigger issue here, the IQ test, kind of revolving around the school system here with this one and some of the practices that they use to, I guess, determine if someone is a smart student or not, and those being a bit controversial here, even as back as far as the 70s here. So it's pretty interesting just because, again, we're seeing a couple of these entries that are on here more for historical reasons or maybe because they push the envelope here and how well those have held up over time compared to some of the newer stuff like For All Mankind that we just saw being on here that's, from this year, right? So kind of an interesting dichotomy there with this list. Number 63, Moonlighting here, Atomic Shakespeare, Moonlighting. That is a really interesting pick. I never watched it, but Moonlighting, Bruce Willis, of course, starring in that one before he was a big action star in the world of movies. I gotta say, that's really fascinating. I would never expect to see a show like Moonlighting appear on here, but half thoughts for Rolling Stone, that's pretty cool to see. Moving on from that, number 62 here, we have Severance, The We Are. This is the season 1 finale. I know, I gotta catch up with this one. I've been told for so long from so many people that this is a show that I have to see, especially this episode, so I will get to it eventually. I promise you I will get to it. I gotta check off the pilot for My So-Called Life and now the finale for Severance. All right, I will do so, I promise you. I know that this is like one of the craziest twists in TV. It leaves your jaw on the floor. That's what I've heard. I don't know any of the details because people have been kind not to spoil it, so I can't spoil it for you because I don't know anything. But yeah, it's very cool to see, again, these more recent shows getting representation here. That's really cool. All right, number 61 here. What do we have? Review with Forrest McNeil, Pancakes, Divorce, Pancakes. Okay, this is this is gonna sound really weird. Okay, as crazy as it is to see, this one I have seen. I have seen this show before, and I have seen this episode. It's Andy Daly here who plays the lead character, and basically the whole premise of this show, it's very goofy. It's very stupid. It's one of those things that could only exist on like an Adult Swim type of channel or a Comedy Central type of channel within the 2010s, right? It has that sort of vibe to it. But it's essentially this show where this dude just goes around reviewing things, just like random everyday things, right? So in this one, he reviews pancakes and fucking divorce. Which is like such a weird combination of stuff. It's very surreal, right? It's got a very surrealist type of humor. But for all the shows that I have not seen or I've said that are not my cup of tea, this is the one where I would explore these weird, sort of obscure cult-like shows, and this is one of them that I have seen, and I do quite like a bit. It's very weird, it's very stupid, but it is very funny at the same time. never in a million years would I have expected it to be on here, especially above some of the stuff that we've seen. Like, where was that South Park episode, man? It was like 80 something, 90 something. And this is number 61. So it's cool to see. I'm not going to deny that it's, not worth a watch, but like, I just would not expect it on here. This has been a very weird list, for better or worse. It's just a very strange list so far. All right, number 60, we have Homeland here, Q&A. This is another one that I haven't seen that much of. I know it's a pretty big show for its time. Don't really hear about it too often now outside of these critical circles, so I don't think it has as big of a fandom, especially in the online world, compared to some of the other prestige dramas there. But pretty cool that it does have an episode here represented. All right, so we have seen the first 40 entries here. We're on to number 59, and so far, like I said, this list has been very weird. It's been very all over the place, both quality and with the variety of shows, but again, we have not seen any duplicates, so it is possible that we might not have any duplicates on this list, which would honestly be shocking to me. I couldn't imagine not having another Game of Thrones episode, or even another, like I said, like South Park or SpongeBob or something. So it's been very strange. I do kind of like the originality here, picking some of the weirder shows, picking some of the lesser known ones like Moonlighting and stuff. But I think just overall for the quality, it's definitely dipping down a little bit. For as much as I think it's very inventive and stuff, it just has had some blunders here. China Beach, Hello Goodbye, Season 4. Long before cable and streaming dramas began to experiment with fractured timelines, there was a final season of the wildly underrated series about the staff of the U.S. Army hospital base during the Vietnam War. I'm going to be honest, I have never heard of this show. I have no idea what this is. China Beach? I don't know what this is. I don't know when this aired. Much of the series finale takes place in 1988. Maybe look this up real quick, because I'm curious. I've never heard of this show. China Beach. Okay, it is from the 80s here. Ran on ABC. Okay, from the late 80s, early 90s. I'm going to tell you, for as much TV as I've watched myself, and for as many of these TV lists that I've seen, I have genuinely never heard of this show. I have no idea what this is. This is completely new to me. It looks like this is the finale, so it must have a pretty, solid, memorable finale to be included here. But man, I have no clue what this is. So we're gonna put a pin in this and just move on, I guess. That is very interesting. Very interesting that this is above South Park and SpongeBob and Severance and The Good Place and all sorts of stuff. All right, let's keep on moving on here. Number 58 here. It looks like we have The Jeffersons here. Sorry, wrong meeting. Definitely a politically charged episode. If you know anything about this here, it tackles racism. It tackles prejudice here. There's a lot of really intense politically themed aspects of this episode. So again, it's one of these historically important, politically charged episodes from these older sitcoms here. Again, no surprise, Rolling Stone. It's kind of their bag here, as we've seen throughout this list. So again, I'm not mad at it necessarily, but probably not something that you would see a lot of people talk about nowadays for that reason. Kind of an uncomfortable, topic there. Moving on for number 57 here, What We Do in the Shadows. This is another one of those kind of like surreal cult comedies that I know is really big nowadays that I just, again, have not seen, unfortunately. But again, I do appreciate the inventiveness here that we have going on, just kind of different picks that you wouldn't normally see. Number 56 here. As it loads here, Rolling Stone, come on. Oh, Friday Night Lights. All right, Mud Bowl. Friday Night Lights, an iconic sports drama here. It's really, I would say it's another one that's pretty damn consistent. You could really pick from any season, any episode, so there's honestly not a bad one in the batch there. And Mud Bowl is a pretty classic one from season 1. 55, Better Things. Not even going to try to pronounce the episode name because I know I'm going to butcher it. Pamela Adlon's stunning semi-autobiographical Comedy drama about Sam Fox, a single mom slash actress raising 3 daughters, is packed with installments that feel worthy of being called the best. I have to admit, again, this is another show I've just never heard of here. I don't know anything about this. Don't know what it's on. Don't know when it's from. So far we've seen a couple of those. I'm honestly surprised. I'm genuinely surprised. As someone who has studied the book on literally all of these like best of lists and have seen just like hundreds of these things over the years, the fact that there are still shows out there and still lists out here being created with these sort of oddball picks, I'm impressed. I am, if not a little annoyed that I can't talk about these in detail, but I'm impressed for sure. Ooh, here we go. We have the Honeymooners here, The Man from Space. The Honeymooners, I mean, again, I think I've mentioned this in past videos. It's kind of a divisive show in some aspects. It's certainly got a unique sense of humor, we'll say. Definitely not in the same vein as a Dick Van Dyke or an I Love Lucy, in my opinion. I would put those above it personally. Jackie Gleason, he's just one of those figures that you kind of either get or you don't. You know, there's just kind of a roadblock there of sorts. But again, to make a list without it would be very hard to do so. So I understand why they have to put it on here. Not super high. It's still in the bottom half of the list. So, that's understandable. All right, moving on from that, 6 Feet Under. Everyone's waiting. This is the finale from 6 Feet Under. I do know about that. I don't know the details because I haven't seen it, and I've tried to avoid spoilers because this is one of those that I do want to come back to again. But 6 Feet Under is a really, really famous, just prestige drama. Again, HBO, they're always going to deliver high quality stuff here. I'm honestly surprised this is as low as it is. Again, for something as big as huge finale to a huge prestige drama like this, I would expect this to be easily in the top 30, if not top 20. This is like one of those shows that I would feel like is a shoo-in. So again, I'm surprised it's in the bottom half here. This is, again, a very, very interesting list, for better or worse. All right, looking at that, number 52, we have Columbo here. Columbo is a classic detective show. A lot of the, current cop dramas, a lot of the more recent police shows that you know of, like Law and Order, for example, kind of stemmed from Columbo and Kojak, things of that nature, that sort of laid the groundwork as well there. So I can understand it being on here again, it getting a decent representation. Just not sure if I would put it this high, not over something like 6 Feet Under for sure. I think that's maybe my biggest issue with this list so far is just the order feels kind of off. The picks themselves are not horrible. There's some that I would think are a little bit more like, like I said, I wouldn't pick them because I'm not a big fan of the show, but I understand why they're on here. But I think the order is just not correct. Just being as blunt as I can. Friends here, the one where everybody finds out, it's pretty hard to deny the impact of this one. I don't know if it's like the most viewed episode because obviously Friends was just hugely popular. They were all viewed by 1 billion people. But yeah, this is probably the one that is the most well-known, probably the most famous, I guess would be the word I would use to describe it. And it's Friends, so if you like Friends, obviously probably agree with the pick. If you don't, you don't. Friends is one of those shows that I know a lot of people have said is very overrated at the time. I don't hate it as much as most people, but I can understand it getting kind of repetitive, kind of annoying at some points. But if you're invested in the Chandler Monica ship, then obviously this is probably the most important episode for that relationship. So makes total sense. Again, I'm honestly a little surprised that it's only number 51. I would have honestly expected it to be higher. So we'll see, I do know though, as I mentioned, that one How I Met Your Mother episode is above, is on this list somewhere, and obviously it is above this because we haven't seen it yet. I know it's coming up soon though, so just to put that debate to rest, How I Met Your Mother. Friends, well, apparently Rolling Stone rides with Himium there. All right, so we're halfway through here. We've seen the first 50 entries, and so far, this list has definitely been a bit rocky. It's been a little inconsistent, both in terms of quality as well as just the ordering, like I said, and some of just the placements have seemed kind of off. But let's see what the front half here, the top 50, has in store for us and see if it can redeem itself a little bit. I'm already seeing The Last of Us here a long, long time. So we do have, finally, a entry of some of my, more recent shows that I really love with The Last of Us here. Man, what a phenomenal episode. This one is surprisingly controversial. Could you guess why? It has a gay couple in it. Could you guess why it's controversial? I know it's super silly that there's still like people out there that think that way and whatnot, but that's just the world we live in, I guess. But I mean, come on, the performances here are fantastic. The storyline, their relationship as it blossoms and as you see them sort of grow as people throughout this very trying time, it's super sweet. And the ending, it might be the best ending of any of the episodes from The Last of Us here. If they only pick one, this is definitely one of the strongest ones in the show so far. All right, next up at number 49 here, we have Justified. This is a series that I've heard a lot of really good things about. I know it's kind of like a Western meets police drama of sorts. It has some procedural elements. It has some like kind of old school elements to it. It's kind of a mishmash of all the best that TV has to offer. But I've never actually watched it myself, so I don't have too much to comment on. It looks like Margot Martindale, though. Yeah, right there, Margot Martindale. If she's in the show, one of my favorite actresses, so I'm definitely going to have to check that out at some point. All right, moving on to number 48 here, On the Family, The Draft Dodger. So once again, we have another example of one of these older sitcom episodes that is politically charged or maybe, has some risque elements to it. This one, of course, involving Vietnam and stuff and war and just talking about that sort of, those sorts of things. As far as All in the Family goes, there's probably a handful of episodes that you definitely could pick for this list that, are all sort of similar themed around that, like having some sort of topic that is a little bit more pushing the envelope and stuff. But again, I'm surprised to see it only at 48. If this is going to only be one episode per show, I would think All in the Family it would be a shoo-in for like the top 25, right? I mean, it's pretty rare to see it anywhere else. So again, I think it's just an issue of the order here with this list as a whole. We have Veep here, Testimony. All right, this is a classic here from season 4. Veep is a show that currently in the past few months has gotten a lot of attention for a particular reason, but it's a classic, man. Julia Louis-Dreyfus does a phenomenal job here. This episode is a pretty big moment in the show's story, if you know about it, doing the trial and everything. All right, number 46, Taxi here, Reverend Jim, A Space Odyssey. Taxi is another old school favorite from the 70s here. Danny DeVito, Andy Kaufman. There's a ton of names attached to this that you know and love. Really can't say too much about this because, again, this is one that I haven't seen myself, this particular episode. But, Taxi, can't really deny it. All right, next up we have Barry here. All right, at 45, Ronnie Lilly. I had a feeling that we were going to see this one, and again, I know this is getting old at this point. I think this episode's a little bit overhyped. This is like a Black Mirror situation where there's just so many good episodes of the show in question in this one. Of course, Barry here is one of the best, action comedies, action dramas, comedy dramas, whatever you want to phrase it as here from the 2010s and into the 2020s here. Bill Hader, an amazing actor. Stephen Root, a fantastic actor as well. So much good chemistry there. I could talk the praises for this show all day long. And this episode just feels so out of place. It's paced really weird. It does have some pretty funny moments. I'm not going to deny. It's still Barry, of course, so it does have some, moments that are a highlight in the episode. But as a whole, this is just one that I don't really come back to all that often. It just has a different sort of tone to it. It's hard to explain unless you've seen it, but I kind of had a suspicion that they were going to throw this one on here because it is for some reason, I think it's the highest rated on IMDb and stuff. again, I don't really know why, frankly, because there's better picks, but I can respect it. And Barry is just one of my favorite shows, period. So I'm glad it's on here somewhere, but yeah, I don't know if that was the right pick, to be honest. All right, and as you can see here at number 44, we do have How I Met Your Mother. So this is where I saw this list for the first time here in the Himium subreddit, talking about that this episode had made the cut here with Slapbet from season 2, which is a very classic one, of course. It's probably the one that's introduced the most amount of running gags to the series and has a lot of really important, like, fan favorite just moments that were sort of important to the lore, I guess you could say, of How I Met Your Mother, with, Robin Sparkles and, of course, the slap bet itself, those being recurring themes, recurring gags throughout the series there. It doesn't have any particularly, like, important, like, groundbreaking ideas or anything like some of the other episodes. It's not like super emotionally driven like some of the later seasons are, but it is very funny. I mean, obviously, I can't hate on it. It's my favorite show, and it is a great episode. I would have loved to have seen maybe something like the Fiaro in here as well. That would have been a great pick from season 2, or just in general some more episodes of this show. I mean, it's obviously one of my favorites. It's very consistent, but I'm just glad that it's on here at all. Could also argue that because it's Rolling Stone and it does have the Robin Sparkles addition to it, that maybe because the music, maybe that was the thing that put it over the edge here. I am a little surprised, maybe more pleasantly surprised, to see it in the top half here. I would have honestly expected it to be a little bit lower if you had just told me, oh, there was an episode of Himium on the best episodes list. Where do you think it is? Probably wouldn't have said any higher than like 70 or 80. So 44, I mean, that's got to be saying something. So I'm happy with that. All right, moving on. Oh, here we go. Next Generation here, The Inner Light from season 5. I don't know if I've seen this one in particular. Again, this is one of those shows I mentioned earlier that I'll watch pretty frequently with my dad, and we just watch, just random episodes here, whatever is kind of on in syndication there is how we usually watch it. So I'm not sure if I've seen this one in particular, but Star Trek The Next Generation, it's a pretty solid show. It's pretty consistent. I prefer the original Star Trek personally. I just like that more campy, like grounded sci-fi sort of style, but Next Generation is also pretty good there. So, again, no surprise that it's on here because it's one of the most endearing franchises for TV. Next up, we have Blackish. Oh, Blackish is a really, really good show. Anytime it's on these sorts of lists, I'm always happy to see it because it was sort of, again, with The Good Place, I feel like it was sort of in that era of the last really amazing, like, just truly phenomenal network sitcoms, because a lot of the stuff that we have now, not very good. Definitely would not see it on a list like this. But Blackish was really good early on. This is from season 2, so it's still pretty early in its run. I do think that season 1 as a whole is a bit more consistent and just overall something I revisit more. But season 2 had some pretty good episodes, and this was one of them for sure. Had a, as it says there, a kind of a very special episode, sort of look and feel to it, surrounding the topic of race and the police system, and kind of centered all around that kind of chaotic topic as it's played out in the last few years here. So kind of on here again for maybe more of a political slant, but Blackish was just so fun. When it was really, really good, it was really, really good. That's what I can say about this show. So another thumbs up in my opinion there. So far, I'd say this the top half of this list here, 50 through 1, is pretty solid. Hill Street Blues here, yeah, Trial by Fury. From season 3. This is definitely another one of my dad's favorite shows. He just loves all these like kind of old school police dramas, right? Like this and NYPD Blue. That's his jam, man. Those are some of his favorite shows of all time. So he would definitely give this one the thumbs up. Hill Street Blues, I mean, it's solid. If you like police dramas, I know that's kind of an oversaturated style nowadays, but if you like them, Hill Street Blues is definitely one of the pioneers that made an impact that has transcended throughout the genre for years and years now. All right, what do we have next here? Looks like we do have The Office here with the Dundies from season 2. This one's kind of surprising because, I mean, speaking as a non-fan, I'm not that big on The Office, but I would have honestly put money that this was either going to be stress relief or dinner party. I thought for sure that we were going to see one of those two. Not to say that the Dundies doesn't also have a huge, like relevance within the fandom and whatnot, but I think this might be a case where they just picked the wrong episode. I don't know. Someone is going to maybe have to, if you're more of a fan of The Office, if you're more tapped into the community there, maybe you can debate this in the comments. But this is maybe a Game of Thrones situation where we have kind of a misplaced, pick here, maybe something a little more offbeat that they're trying to be a little more like unique with that maybe is going to turn some heads. But either way, I just personally, The Office, I think is kind of overrated. So I'm not too shaken up by, it regardless, because I don't think I would really want it to be super high anyway. But as far as the pick, I mean, I would have picked Stress Relief, that cold open, man. It's just one of the most famous, one of the most popular, most viewed, scenes in the entire show. So I'm just surprised, but hey, that's Rolling Stone for you, I guess. Coming in next here at number 39, we have Lost here with The Constant from season 4. Lost has been such an interesting show to follow in terms of its sort of reputation over the years, right? Because when it was first on, this thing was the biggest show of all time, man. It was inescapable. It came out in the 2000s, and I wasn't even watching it at the time, but like, even as a kid, you couldn't escape this thing. It was just everywhere. There were just so many big stars that came out of it, people that were nobodies when they signed up and then became just absolutely huge talent later on in their careers. And then eventually, when the infamous finale dropped, there was like this huge backlash, and people said, "Oh, this is the worst show ever. It's just awful." And now it's kind of getting again that reappraisal where it's like, actually, you know what? It had some bangers in its catalog, And when it comes to the best episode, again, someone more educated than me on the show can probably debate in the comments what the best episode of Lost is, but I'm sure that there are plenty to go around here. It's just one of those shows that has so many twists, so many big moments that it's hard to narrow it down on one. And again, this is why I'm surprised that this list is shaping out to be just one per show. I would have honestly bet that Lost was another one, even in spite of its infamy in some corners, that this would have had more than one entry. So I'm honestly a little surprised here. Okay, at number 38 here we have Forks. Let's go, dude. I love Forks, man. This is probably my favorite episode of The Bear. Next to, of course, Review from season 1. This is definitely my favorite episode from season 2, at least. And I'm super happy it's on here, man. The Bear is just so good. So far we have 2 of my 3. I just don't think Abbott's going to have the legs to compete in this top tier here. If it was on this list, we probably would have saw it already. So that's the only one that didn't make the cut here. But I'm really glad The Bear is on here because for these more recent shows, especially for the 2020s, it's shaping out to be probably one of the biggest shows that's going to end the decade here with just such an insane amount of acclaim and awards and everything. I mean, this thing just racks up Emmys like it's nothing, dude. This thing is just a masterclass in comedy and drama and suspense and everything, man. And especially with Forks, with Richie's character arc and the way that he evolves and such as a person in this episode, it's just beautiful to see, man. Richie's one of my favorite characters, so I just absolutely love this one. If you're going to put a second episode on here, like I said, Review would be a good choice. I know Dogs is very popular in the fandom as well, with critics especially. And of course, Fishes, that's the one with all the big guest stars. But Forks is a very solid choice here. I'm really happy with that pick. And honestly, I think it's in a good spot too. 38, that seems fair given that it's very recent. So I think that's pretty solid there. Okay, next up, Freaks and Geeks here. Oh man, shout out Jason Segel here. He's been on quite a few of these shows so far, him included, of course. But Freaks and Geeks, man, I think this is the finale. Yeah, episode 18. So it's another one with a one-season wonder, of course, one of those shows that was only on for a single year before eventually getting the axe here. But Freaks and Geeks, man, is just so iconic. It's really, I mean, coming of age, you don't really see as many of them nowadays. I feel like that was a genre that was more geared towards like the late 90s, early 2000s, kind of like with My So-Called Life and stuff we saw earlier. And this is just one of those shows that really, when you look back on your teenage years, your high school years, there's just so many moments that you can sort of transport your mind back to, that were like very emotional or very chaotic in some way, both good and bad, right? It covers all spectrums. So a very, very well established show. Definitely one that is, I think, probably essential viewing. I would say it's really up there just as far as how well it does those sorts of tropes. All right, next up, 30 Rock here, Apollo from season 3. 30 Rock, as I've said with plenty of these entries already, it's just not really my cup of tea. Again, which is surprising because I love SNL, and I love that culture. And there's a ton of really great actors on the show, of course, Tina Fey and Tracy Morgan and all those guys. They've done some really good stuff in other mediums and such on other shows. But I don't know, for some reason 30 Rock just doesn't really work for me. I can't explain why. So again, I get why it's on here. This is no stranger to these types of lists, but honestly, for me, it doesn't do much. It just doesn't do much. All right, next up, the X-Files here. Claude Brookman's Final Repose. Very interesting title. Can't say too much about this one because, again, the X-Files is a show that I've only seen little bits and pieces for here and there. I haven't sat down and watched like the entirety of it. Moving on to 34 here, News Radio Arcade. That's an interesting one. I can't say that I've seen this one either. I don't think. This is from season 3, so I haven't seen that far into the show, but I've seen a bit of season 1 of News Radio, and I do enjoy it quite a bit. News Radio, it's one of those workplace comedies from the 90s that's gotten a bit of a reappraisal as well. Had some big names attached to it early on. Joe Rogan, you see there. Yeah, Joe Rogan, that's where he got his start here on network TV, believe it or not. But yeah, I'm sure that this episode is really good. I just never watched it myself. But yeah, it's cool. Again, News Radio, that's just kind of a weird show to see. Again, high on this list above a lot of the stuff that we've seen already. Just not a good order, I guess, is what I'm coming to the conclusion with this list for. Just not a very consistent order here. The West Wing, Two Cathedrals. This is another one that, like, I'm sure everybody in the drama space knows about the West Wing and how impactful it was, again, during its day. It's one of my parents' favorite shows, again. A show that just hooks you in and does not let go for the life of you. And if you like that style, then obviously this pick is going to be a thumbs up for you. All right, moving on to number 32, Reservation Dogs. Okay. Season 2 here, Mabel. Reservation Dogs, that's a show that I think I mentioned last time. I was like, that's a possibility that could be on a best shows list, especially for one that's been updated to a 2020s as one of the more recent shows that's really had a big impact of the last few years. And obviously now it's on this Rolling Stone list. So shout out to Reservation Dogs. Again, never seen it myself, but I've heard nothing but great things. I've heard that this is a really funny show at times. It's a really emotionally driven show. It strikes a good balance between those two extremes. So, yeah, shout out there. All right, next up here, number 31, Deadwood here. Deadwood, this kind of Western style show from the 2000s here, HBO. Again, not one for me personally. I understand why it's on here, but doesn't do much for me as far as like hooking me in or compelling me as much as some of these other ones. So again, no real comment on this episode in particular because I've never seen it. Number 30, Parks and Recreation flu season. All right, so we do have some Parks and Recs love here. Again, this being above The Office, I'm surprised. I would put it above The Office personally. I like Parks and Rec a lot more, but I don't know, and also above The Good Place. That's the other thing for just Michael Schur, that's another one that I'm like kind of surprised it's above too. But yeah, Parks and Rec is hilarious. You see here with Chris Traeger, Rob Lowe, man, just such a funny person in this episode. Just like great character all around. Parks and Rec, just known for its great quotables here, and you can see in the article they list the one that Andy gives here, where he says, "I typed your symptoms into the thing up here. It says you have a network connectivity problems." That just gets me every single time, man. That is such a good line. It says he's improvised it, which I did not know that until just now. So shout out to Chris Pratt, man. That guy, before he became the voice of every single cartoon character on the planet, he was improvising some of the best quotes on TV. So, but yeah, Parks and Rec, shout out to it, man. It's a classic for a reason. At number 29 here, we have Arrested Development with Good Grief. This still, man, this has become such a meme in so many circles online. I've just seen that image so many times here. Michael Cera, of course, kind of just doing that really slumped over walk there. That's pretty iconic. As far as Arrested Development goes as a whole, I got to admit, and I know this is going to sound repetitive yet again, but it's just not really a show for me. The humor and stuff, the voiceover, just doesn't really do a lot for me personally. I'm not really a big fan of Schitt's Creek either, which I think is pretty similar in terms of like story and stuff. And I gotta say, no Schitt's Creek, I just realized, is on this list, so that's kind of interesting. But of course, Arrested Development being an American show, as they mentioned earlier, kind of having a slant there towards American TV makes sense. But yeah, so overall, like, I get it. I get the inclusion here. It's, again, hard to find a best of list with TV that doesn't include Arrested Development. But for me personally, I just wouldn't have it if it were up to me. Moving on next, Battlestar Galactica. So this is the pilot here. This is one of the few episodes of the show that I have seen here. It was part of my pilot project a couple years ago. And I do remember liking it. I think it was sort of in the middle tier. You know, it was okay. It wasn't amazing, but I'm shocked it's on here because Battlestar Galactica, it's kind of one of those shows that like is more of a fan favorite than a critical success as far as I'm concerned. I know at the very least the original was definitely like that, which is why of course they rebooted it, which is this version of it. But I gotta say, I would not expect this to be on here. I mean, it's a decent enough episode. It gives you a decent, you know, outline of the story and everything. It establishes well. For what a pilot needs to do, it does that fine, but it just doesn't have a lot of like memorable scenes. It's not exactly like the most like revolutionary show ever. You know, I don't know. This is kind of a weird pick, I gotta lie. And honestly, why would you not take the opportunity and put this at 33, huh? All right, moving on from that, we have Frasier here at the Ski Lodge. This is one that I am familiar with, just out of sheer, just like, you know, iconic, just being one of the most iconic episodes of the show, even though I'm not a big fan of Frasier. So again, I get this. It's not for me personally. We haven't seen Cheers yet, so I'm sure Cheers we're going to see a little bit later on in the list. Frasier was actually one of the shows that was snubbed from the variety list for overall shows, which I was surprised by because even though I'm not a fan of it, it's like, come on, you got to have Frasier. So it makes sense that it's on here. Again, could honestly be a little higher depending on how you wanted it. BoJack here, BoJack Horseman, Fish Out of Water. Again, this is another one where it's not really a surprise to see on here, even if it's not my preferred style of animation. I prefer more comedic stuff. This is a little more on the dramatic side there. I'm just honestly like, for animation, I mean, we haven't seen that much of it. This is one of maybe like 4 or 5 shows. Because what else we see? We saw South Park, we saw SpongeBob, we saw King of the Hill. We haven't seen The Simpsons yet, and we haven't seen Family Guy. So probably Family Guy is out of the question at this point. Simpsons, I'm sure we're going to see at some point going into this last quarter of the list. You know, Rick and Morty, that's interesting. We've seen like the Cosby Show and stuff, but not Rick and Morty. So what does that tell you? All right, we are on to the final stretch here, the last 25 entries. This is the make or break moment here because, again, this list, it's been a little all over the place. I think the ordering has been a little hit or miss here, so we're going to have to see what they do in this last quarter of the list here. We have Homicide, A Life on the Street here. Shout out again to these old school police dramas. This is another one of my dad's all-time favorites. He just loves cop shows, man. That's probably like his favorite genre of TV, and Homicide is one of those that despite not being as maybe culturally relevant as much as it once was, it has a lot of talent behind it. It's got a lot of grit to it, got a lot of really good heart to it. This is just one of those shows that if you like police dramas, is definitely worth checking out. All right, I see Fleabag here. Yep, Fucking Fleabag every time, man. Fleabag is the show that I have just never really clicked with, and it's always one of those examples where I'm like, I'm gonna give it another chance eventually, but I just need everyone to get off my back about it before I do it, you know? Because I've just heard, oh, it's the most amazing show ever. Oh, you're gonna love it. Best comedy, fucking hilarious. Once that praise stops, then I can like come in with a clear mind and come back and be a little more objective to it. Because I have seen a few episodes and I just never really did much, honestly. But yeah, apparently this is I guess is it the first episode here? It says season 2, but it says episode 1. So maybe I don't know. I guess that's how they title it in Britain or something. Another reason why America is the greatest country on earth, motherfuckers. All right, looks like we have some MASH here. Yeah, MASH. MASH is the show, right? It's the show that forever and always will hold the record as the most viewed show of all time with its series finale. This looks like it's the season finale for season 3. So again, I'm sure probably a very important episode to the story here. Buffy here, the body from season 5. This is another one that, like, even if you don't know too much about Buffy as the show, you've probably heard of this episode or maybe seen a couple clips from it here and there. And Buffy, man, that's a show that I do want to come back to again. I've seen bits and pieces here. I love the style of it. It can be a little campy at times. It's a very stylistic show, especially for its time. That late 90s, early 2000s kind of like, WB sort of style. It's very, very nostalgic in a lot of ways. So it's one that I do want to come back to again at some point. And obviously this is a standout from the series. Curb Your Enthusiasm here, Mr. Softy from season 8. Curb, we haven't seen Seinfeld yet, so obviously I'm assuming Seinfeld's going to be on here somewhere in this top 20, but Curb, you can kind of throw it on that pile of shows again that I get, but I don't love. More of I respect it than I actually would prefer to actually watch it to some extent. So that's what I have to say about that. All right, next up, The Americans here. The Magic of David Copperfield 5, The Statue of Liberty Disappears. That is quite the mouthful here. The Americans, this is one of those shows, again, that I want to come back to as well. I really love what I've seen from The Americans. I get its praise. I get its acclaim. Yeah, it's a very, very good espionage, adult, politically tinged drama. That's definitely up there for me as far as something that I would really, really enjoy, and it has a lot of action as well. So it's one that I do have to come back to at some point. I know, just all these shows out here, all these fucking shows that I gotta watch at some point. I get it, but yeah. So I'm not surprised at all that's on here because The Americans is awesome. Okay, here we go. I Love Lucy here, job switching. So this is definitely probably the most iconic scene in TV, maybe of like any medium ever, dude. The amount of times that I've fucking seen this goddamn clip on them doing the conveyor belt scene is probably, you can't overestimate the amount of times that this has been parodied or spoofed or referenced or recreated in some way. This thing is fucking everywhere. So for this to only be 19, I'm honestly shocked this is not in the top 10. I would have put money that this was in the top 10. I actually would have put money that Lucy Does a Commercial would have been on this list as well, in addition to this. But I guess if we only have to pick one, I mean, it had to be between those two. If you know nothing about this show, you've seen the conveyor belt scene, or you've seen it recreated in some way, because it's everywhere. It's everywhere, and it's hilarious. It's one of those scenes that, again, I was talking about earlier, where The Honeymooners or Andy Griffith, a show like that doesn't have as much ubiquity to it, it lacks that sense of humor where everybody can just immediately understand why something is funny. This is an example of just that, where everyone can understand exactly why this works, exactly why this has held the test of time. This is a perfect example of just that. So for this to be on the list again at only 19, I question Rolling Stone's validity here. Come on, this should be top 10. And Lucy Does a Commercial should also be in here somewhere. But fair enough, at least it's on the list at all. So we are really into the nitty gritty here. I guess I have to come back and say, like, I guess we're not going to see any duplicates, which I'm genuinely surprised by. Like, how do you narrow down a show like I Love Lucy or The Office or a fucking what else? Breaking Bad. I mean, if there's only one Breaking Bad episode on this list, like, this is crazy. You know, this is wild. But then again, Rolling Stone gonna Rolling Stone. Speaking of Breaking Bad here, Better Call Saul, more or less here, fun and games. So they're picking a season 6 episode, which is kind of crazy because season 6 again is the most recent. Has had the least amount of time to kind of stew and develop within the fandom, within the TV landscape. But from what I understand, especially for hardcore Breaking Bad, Better Call Saul fans, season 6 was filled with just 10 out of 10 masterpieces, and from what I understand, this is one of them. So again, I know it's another show I have to come back to. I hear you guys. I know I'm gonna get to it eventually, I promise. All right, moving on from that here, number 17 here, Mary Tyler Moore chuckles and bites the dust. Absolutely 100% on board with this one. This one is classic. This is iconic. All right, number 16 here, we have ER, Love, Labor, Lost here from season 1. So another one of these medical dramas here. ER is again in, I would say that, like, top tier of medical dramas, definitely above something like Grey's Anatomy, which we saw earlier. So I have no quarrels about this. It's a little high, I gotta say, borderline almost top 15 here, so that's pretty surprising. Again, for the amount of shows that it's above, I just feel like the ordering here is really the thing that has kind of been the Achilles heel with this list overall. Here we have Community here, Remedial Chaos Theory. I had a feeling we were going to see this one on here. Shout out to Mike here. I know this is his all-time favorite comedy episode, if not his favorite episode of TV ever. So top 15, I'm sure he's happy with that placement there. Number 14 here, Succession, Connor's Wedding. This is another one of these like more recent ones that, again, even if you've never seen Succession or you don't know anything about the show, you've definitely heard of this episode. You know its impact here. I'm not going to give away what happens, but if you know, right? How meaningful that scene was, how meaningful that character was to the show. Number 13, Twin Peaks here. So this is the first episode, another pilot here. Again, knowing all these pilots here, I gotta weigh in and say I think this one is a little overrated as well. Twin Peaks as a whole, I think maybe the reason why this has so much acclaim and so much like good faith all these years later is just because David Lynch, as a creator, as a director, had a very unique approach to TV that, you know, he's kind of more known for movies and such. So bringing that to the small screen maybe was a little bit more inventive for the time, and that has definitely, you know, broadened a lot of people's view on what a drama could look like, right? And some of the you know, experimental wacky stuff that would happen later on. Some of the more avant-garde stuff that he would introduce into the show at some points. And I get it, you know, it has a different look and feel to it that you don't normally see with these types of cop dramas again. But personally, I like tradition. You know, I'm kind of a vanilla guy when it comes to that stuff. I like the Law and Orders, you know, I like the NYPD Blues and the Hill Street Blues and stuff like that. So this is a little too maybe avant-garde at times for me. And also, I just think this pilot is way too long. It's really bloated. There's too much fat on it. It's like over an hour and a half. So I don't know, man. To me, I don't think this is a very good pick, at least to be this high. But you know, that's just my opinion, right? So you can disagree with me for sure, but yeah, I'm not that impressed with it. I definitely wouldn't put it over like. Again, a lot of the stuff we've seen here, I'd put this way lower. So borderline top 10 is crazy. Number 12 here, The Wire, middle ground. Again, The Wire, I mean, it has to be on here somewhere. I'm a little shocked that this is in the top 10, but I mean, I guess we're making room for maybe some of the more comedic stuff as well, getting a little bit of a balance in there. So curious what else is up here, of course. Okay, and here we go. The Twilight Zone here. The monsters are due on Maple Street. Again, I talked about this earlier, the Twilight Zone, again, is another show I would have thought had multiple entries if that's what they were doing here. But again, it makes sense that we were going to see it very high up here. This is a classic. This is an all-time classic for sure. All right, so we are just about to look at the top 10 best episodes of TV according to Rolling Stone. I can't lie, I don't have super high expectations for this. Let's go over some of the shows that we've yet to see. So obviously we haven't seen Breaking Bad yet. We have to see that somewhere. We have not seen Seinfeld yet. We have to see that somewhere. We haven't seen Mad Men yet. So those are like some of the big three. I doubt we're going to see anything else. The Walking Dead, for top 10, I just don't know how likely it is. We haven't seen Abbott yet, so that was another one of my kind of dark horse picks that they got snubbed here to make room for fucking Moonlighting and Review. That's crazy. Yeah, I don't know. I'm a little stumped. I do kind of like that though, because it keeps me guessing as to what's going to come here. The fact that there is only one episode per show, as far as it's looking to be, it's possible that this top 10 is just all like duplicates of some of these bigger shows, but I don't think it's very likely. So I would have bet that like a second Office episode, a second I Love Lucy episode, but it doesn't look like we're getting that. So let's just dive right in. Let's just see what we have left here. Okay, Atlanta here. Teddy Perkins from season 2. Atlanta is another show that I've heard just so much about, and it does sound interesting. I do love Childish Gambino, especially his music. I've never really been that impressed with Community, so this show has always kind of put a little bit of like a weariness in that regard, because I'm like, I don't know if TV is his best medium. I just prefer his music, but Atlanta is just one that I've heard nothing but rapturous praise for, so I do have to check it out at some point. I'm sure this is really good. But top 10 though, like, yeah, I don't know, man. All right, The Shield. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, we haven't seen The Shield yet. The Shield is really good. Definitely for like these anti-hero, just sort of like crime dramas. This was one of the first that really broke through and kind of paved the way for a lot of that stuff throughout the 2000s and 2010s. And I'm glad it's getting its flowers, man. Michael Chiklis, man. Great actor. Great actor. All right. Oh, do we have Roots here? We sure do. Roots Part 2. Damn, this is the second time because, again, Variety, referencing that list, they also had Roots in the top 10 there as one of the best shows of all time. So it's just fascinating to see, again, the sort of reputation of Roots and how it's evolved over all these years. Because at the time when it first aired, it literally was like the most viewed show ever. Like, there was just nothing else that could compete with it. Every episode, I think, was at least 100 million viewers, and there were only like 7 or 8 episodes because it was a miniseries. So they just had that show locked in for like a straight month, you know, of just crazy, crazy viewership there. And then later on, it, you know, kind of died down a little bit, and some of the stuff, you know, it being about slavery and whatnot, was maybe seen a little controversially, and you know, I don't think it ever got reran or anything like that. So it kind of just, you know, people forgot about it, and it didn't get as much attention for a little while. And then now it's obviously coming back into the fold, and you're seeing a lot of people reassess it as well. So just kind of an interesting how that's evolved over time, and kind of the roller coaster path that it's had in a similar fashion to something like Lost as well that we talked about earlier. But yeah, Roots here. I mean, I'm not going to deny it. It's very impactful. It's obviously hugely popular for a reason. So makes sense to see it up here. All right, number 7 here, we have Cheers. All right, Showdown Part 2. This is the season 1 finale. I think this is the one where Jack and Diane do eventually get together here. So kind of the classic will they, won't they setup that they had there. But yeah, Cheers is awesome. Cheers, I'm not going to deny it at all here. I've seen people rank it above, you know, Seinfeld and stuff as the best comedy. I've seen it ranked above I Love Lucy, you know, so it's definitely in the conversation there. It's stood the test of time for a very good reason. So top 10, it makes perfect sense to me. Number 6 here, we have Mad Men. Okay, The Suitcase here. another one in kind of the same way as like Succession, or one of those shows that, again, even if you don't know the details of it, you've probably seen or heard a little bit about this episode and its impact to the series. Again, I won't give it away in case you're watching it yourself, but yeah, Mad Men is a classic, though. All right, so top 5 time. Okay, we do have Seinfeld here. It looks like the contest, of course, probably the most iconic plot from the show here, and just all of the wacky antics that Seinfeld is known for. I mean, the contest makes perfect sense. If they were going to put a second one on here, I would have bet that the Chinese restaurant would have been an obvious choice as well from season 2. But yeah, I'm not gonna deny. I mean, it's fucking Seinfeld. What do you want me to say? Seinfeld is awesome. All right, so top 4. Man, what else? So we saw Seinfeld and Mad Men. What else is up here? Sopranos. Okay, so Sopranos. Yeah, that was one that we didn't see yet. It just slipped my mind there. But College from season 1, definitely one of the standouts from the Sopranos. There, one of the original crime dramas as well, with Tony Soprano as sort of the anti-hero of sorts, so similar to The Shield, kind of paving the way. And many people credit it as the single best show of all time, even above something like Breaking Bad. So again, not even in the top 3 is a little surprising as far as the ranking goes. All right, number 3 here, The Leftovers. Wow, that is bold. That is bold. I honestly did not see that coming, because The Leftovers is just a show that I just do not really enjoy that much. So I usually just put it out of my psyche there. I don't really put it in the same league as a lot of the other ones up here. But I mean, sure, whatever. Shout out to The Leftovers, I guess. Rolling Stone gonna Rolling Stone. That's what I'm putting it out as. All right, top 2 time. I'm nervous. I mean, I guess I wouldn't be upset if Ozymandias was number 1, but because I'm expecting that to be what it is. But okay, The Simpsons, yeah, that makes sense. Last Exit to Springfield. Wow, over Homer's Enemy, huh? Homer's Enemy, I would have thought would have been the choice, but I mean, this is a good episode too. It's been a while since I saw this one, but yeah, I like The Simpsons, of course. I mean, who doesn't like The Simpsons? I probably wouldn't have bet that it was such a gap between everything else animation wise. I think that's what's shocking, because so many of the animated shows were very low on the list. They were in like the bottom 10 or 20 slots, and then this is like way up here in the top 3, So that gap is a little surprising, but again, it's The Simpsons. What can you say? And then I'm going to bet pretty assuredly at this point that it's going to be Breaking Bad, and I would bet Ozymandias. I can't expect it to be anything else. Yeah, Ozymandias there as number 1. Can't deny it. It's a great episode. It is. Breaking Bad. I mean, I've had my fair share of people that try to debate me when I say Breaking Bad as a whole is overrated, because I think it is a little overrated, even if it is still an incredible show and certainly one of the best performances with Bryan Cranston on TV. And this is, the episode that everyone talks about here. So I get it. I totally understand why it's on here and why it's number 1. I think as a whole, I'm pretty disappointed with this list. Even if there are a lot of picks that make sense, I just don't think the order here is good at all, man. I think the order is really, really messy. Just a lot of stuff that feels either really lowballed, or like The Leftovers at number 3 is just crazy. I can't believe that. But just a lot of stuff that feels lowballed, and the lack of multiple episodes per show just does not seem right. I mean, I get wanting to encourage variety. I totally understand wanting to encourage variety, and I get wanting to put forth some lesser known shows, give them a bit of a spotlight, and maybe mix up the list a little bit in that regard, try to pull some stuff out that you wouldn't normally see. That's all fine and dandy, but it just feels incomplete, I guess would be what I'm looking for here to describe it. Just kind of incomplete in terms of not fully showcasing how many of these shows really were that great, you know? Because one episode of Breaking Bad or one episode of The Twilight Zone or I Love Lucy, it doesn't do it justice to fully realize how big, how important, how just phenomenal a lot of those shows were, you know? And to me, that just feels like an obvious sort of blunder that they made here, personally. But honestly, for Rolling Stone standards, kind of looking at it on their scale, it could be worse. I'll give you that. It could be worse. I'm happy that the Bear made it. I'm happy that The Last of Us made it. I think those picks were really solid. I'm not opposed to the list as a whole, but there are just some pretty obvious faults, pretty obvious cracks in the armor that I feel like they could have addressed here. So I don't know. What do you guys think? I know that this topic, again, like I said up front, it's very tough to make a list like this. There's just so many options here. There's so many choices. Even with saying that they're going to outright, exclude reality stuff and sketch comedy and all that, they still, there's still just so many picks that they could have had on this list. So it's very, very difficult here. But let me know what you guys think in the comments here. Thank you guys for watching another one of these TV-themed reaction lists. If you want me to do more of these, please let me know. If you know of any other lists like this that have come out recently, I would be happy to do another one of these blind reactions here. And if you're not already subscribed, make sure you do so and leave a like if you enjoyed it. With all that said, though, I wish you guys have a great rest of your day. Take care, and I will see you very soon for the next video.